probably what will happen is that Israel will launch a false flag against the Americans, which will justify an American attack against Iran, right? So that's a possible scenario. But again, the question is, if this is really a ceasefire, if Donald Trump is really intent on peace, why does he continue to send U.S. forces to the Middle East? Why is the United States continue to send aircraft carriers, the USS George Bush, to the Middle East? What they're really trying to do is buy time in order for their ground troops to get ready to attack and seize the strait. So it doesn't matter if you negotiate with the leadership of Iran, because the IRGC, the people who are fighting, will not agree to a ceasefire because they do not trust the Americans or the Israelis. So whatever happens in Pakistan will not affect the outcome of the battlefield. And that's a problem with the Mossack defense. It's using something called the Mossack defense, which is to say that there's 31 provinces, and these are 31 cells or units that are all responsible for their own strategy and attack and defense, meaning that there's no longer a centralized command. Think of the Mossack defense as almost a dead man switch, where if you kill the Ayatollah will tell his people to fight to the end. So the Mossack defense will only come to an end if either Iran is defeated or the Americans are defeated. This thing collapses if there's in between a ceasefire, because in order for the Iranians to implement the ceasefire, they themselves will have to go and control these Mossack units in the provinces, which basically means a civil war. Okay? So it's almost impossible, even if Iran were to negotiate a favorable peace deal, for Iran to actually implement this peace deal within its military. Okay? That's problem number 2. Problem number 3 is the United States continues to have an air bridge to the Middle East. So even though there's a ceasefire, you have these massive movement of U.S. ground troops, of U.S. planes, of U.S. artillery and tanks to the Middle East. So if there's really a peace, why is this happening? And another way of saying this is that the political systems of both the United States and Iran have lost control over the war. Once these militaries start fighting, they are determined to fight to the bitter end. Okay? But unfortunately, what this tells me, the fact that Iran is willing to negotiate a peace treaty, probably means that there is a schism or divide between the political leadership in Iran and the military leadership in Iran. And this is going to cause a lot of problems in the future. So maybe before this past month, it seemed as though that Iran had control over the battlefield and Iran was winning it. But I think over time, what's going to happen is that fissures will arise in Iran, and Iran will start losing the battle more and more as the United States and Israel develop a much more coherent strategy against Iran. Another major issue is that as this war drags on, the world economy is going to suffer, which means that people can no longer drive their cars, and which means maybe a lot of people will also starve. And this means that ultimately public or global opinion will slowly turn against Iran. Okay? And even Iran's closest allies, Russia and China, will feel the strain of this war and maybe even pressure Iran to end this war. But again, as we discussed previously, because of the way that Iran has structured its military defense, it is impossible for Iran to end this war unless it's either destroyed or it's destroyed the Americans. Okay?